Governments and corporations around the world are planning to give so-called vaccine passports to people inoculated against COVID-19. These aim to revive the travel industry and could eventually be crucial to reopening the rest of the global economy. But as Paolo Montesilio reports, policymakers will have to make sure the schemes are implemented in such a way that no one is left behind.
In a world that's hunkered down because of a deadly pandemic, this could be a key that opens countless doors. Denmark is planning to hand out what it's calling vaccine passports to citizens who've been immunized against COVID-19. It's the result of a partnership between the government and large corporations. The goal, at least initially, is to let executives travel again for business.
There are parts of Danish society that need to move forward. There is a business community that needs to be able to travel.
One of the most central elements in dealing with this crisis is precisely to bring the infection rate down, but also to create mobility, both within the society and also traveling in and out of the country, which we are completely dependent on.
Vaccine passports are gaining traction across Europe, with Estonia and Sweden planning similar schemes. The British government is also funding the development of vaccine passes. Companies involved say they want to keep it as simple as possible.
You don't need to know things like names and addresses and ages and health insurance numbers or anything like that. You just need to know that if somebody turns up and presents their face and you verify their face, that person, whatever identity they claim to be, has actually been vaccinated.
But there are concerns these papers may further entrench inequalities in a post-pandemic world. Critics say people who lack access to vaccines, as well as those who choose not to get them, may be left out when economies reopen.
I think there are huge issues. I mean, there are issues of discrimination, there are issues of two classes, there are issues of privilege. So I think there are huge social and political issues raised by vaccines, and it is the role, I think, of civil society and governments to discuss and debate it.
If these issues are resolved, few industries would benefit more than aviation. Due to border closures, passenger numbers plunged 60% last year to levels not seen since 2003. The sector's also expected to lose close to $39 billion this year, adding to the $118 billion it bled in 2020. Paolo Montesilio, TRT World.
Well, for more, let's go to Dr. Bharat Pankania in the British city of Bath. He's a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter's Medical School with extensive experience on advising on national communicable disease control plans. Welcome back to the program, Doctor. Now, these vaccine passports, on the face of it, would, I guess, signify whether or not a person has received a vaccine, but they could also certify that a person has had a positive immune response to the virus and was presumed to be resistant to further infection. Can I ask you about the biology of it first? If someone has been immunized, does that necessarily mean they're no longer contagious?
No, it doesn't mean that they are not contagious. And this is a very big and important issue to address. Just because you have been immunized does not always mean that you are now walking around with an invisible shield and you are not infecting other people or bringing your infection to another country.
Okay, and what is the danger of the fact that that is the case? I mean, potentially if these passports are used as indicators of whether or not someone can travel or enter a business or even apply for accommodation in some instances, that presumes that that person is I guess, a safe being and COVID-free when they're actually not.
So the only thing we can say with a person who has been immunized is that they have been immunized, no more, no less. I accept that the biology teaches us that that person is unlikely to go on to have severe illness, and in most cases, unlikely to be a super spreader of infection, but we don't know that for sure. And the issues is just because your country, and if you look at it, Sweden, Denmark, Israel, Iceland, all these rich European countries wish to say, I have a passport, now let me enter your country, your poorer country, Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Africa, etc. It's imposing conditions on another country, and the other country may say, you've got your passport, keep it to yourself, we wish to keep infection out of our country. So those are also important issues that it has to be addressed at a global level, what a passport means and what infection control therefore entails after you come into a country just because you've been immunized.
Now, as we heard in Paolo's story, several governments and businesses, particularly the airline industry, are very keen to roll out these vaccine passports in order to reopen travel, reopen the economy. Do you think they'll work?
It's an imposition, I feel. The bottom line from an infection control point of view is that, of course, it is better to be immunized, but it leads to a lot of inequalities and a lot of imposition on other countries. In other words, say you want to go from Denmark to Kenya, and Kenya has hardly managed to immunize its people, but just because it's a person from Denmark and he carries a piece of paper from the government of Denmark, does that mean he has green light to go everywhere and other people have to stay stuck in their countries? We need to address these very important issues. I would want the European nations to not only think about issuing passports, but help the poorer countries to also immunize their population. And when more people across the globe are immunized, we can then talk about the passports and what we do with it.
That's right. I want to talk more about the potential for this to actually deepen the divide, because depending on how governments choose to implement these vaccine passports, they may require them in order for people to perhaps apply for a job or certainly enter restaurants, cafes and other businesses, and also to travel. There is something that's inherently ethically wrong with this, isn't there? The fact that it is going to further create this world of haves and have-nots in terms of the vaccine.
Very much so. And not only is this an inequality issue, but it's also a case of haves and have-nots. And it leads to a lot of tension in the communities. I'm not saying that just because you have been immunized, you are safe and therefore you've got the green light for everything. It should be a case of we try and immunize as many people as possible, as fast as possible, and maintain our infection control guard even after you have been immunized. Because until we bring down case numbers globally, we just don't know what a vaccinated person looks like.
Okay, Dr. Bharat Pankhania, we will keep an eye on how these passports are rolled out, but thank you again for joining us on Money Talks.